Welcome to the Moonbeaming podcast. I'm Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, an artist, author, and intuitive. And together we'll explore life through a creative and spiritual lens. You'll learn so much about mysticism, creativity, consciousness, depth psychology, business, and more. And you'll get to listen to conversations with luminaries that you won't hear anywhere else. With each episode, you'll receive insights, frameworks, inspiration, and tools to help you thrive and grow. Hello, welcome back to Moonbeaming. I'm so glad you are here back this week. We are doing a little something different. I did this little mini series on what spirituality is and is not, and I wanted to cap it off with a share about my life and how I came to spirituality and what kind of got me here and my process with it and how I utilize it, and just giving a little bit more about my own personal background. I don't know that I've ever done an episode like this. I'm the host. I can be a bit private, although this is my podcast. So this is probably the main place where I share the most of myself with y'all because I love you so much. So I just wanted to sum up and kind of share how I came to spirituality, what it helped me with. I feel sort of different than other people I know who are professional spiritual practitioners in that spirituality has become so popular in the last, 5 years or so. And when I began, I think spirituality obviously has always been popular. Hello, whether it's religion or yoga or other traditions globally. But I don't think it's been at least as mainstream, or there hasn't been as many resources, as in the past 5 to 10 years. And when I was growing up, it certainly wasn't in the ether. It certainly was something that in a lot of ways came to me. It was not something I sought out. I never wanted to be a spiritual practitioner or anything like that. And so my background is a little bit different. I have a little bit, like I said, of reluctance. And I'll share more about that in a little bit, and in sharing some of my own story today, it might be really useful for you to think about, how you came to mysticism or magic or intuition, the occult, whatever you want to call it, to think about what you've done with it, what it's helped you with, what it's shown you, how it's supported you, and then thinking about what you want to do next. Either in your life with it, thinking about applying the lessons or the philosophies to be true for you for sure, and getting to it on that level. Because I shared recently in a newsletter, for me, I always find the most success, and I mean that in the most wholesome sense of the word. I don't mean just material. I'm talking the whole. I find the most wholesome success in my life when I combine the etheric with the material, when I combine the unseen with the seen. This is how we create congruence, which is another theme of this year. And so if you've been feeling a little bit not congruent or totally not congruent at all, you might want to look at what's going on spiritually, or you might want to look at, why you feel a little out of alignment and what you can do to get more in alignment. Also, looking back could be super useful with this idea of timeline weaving. And the Creative Intuitive Tarot, which is this class I taught earlier this year, I'll probably teach it 1 or 2 more times in 2025. So you can stay tuned about that. And you can also sign up for the newsletter. That's definitely where we announce everything. I talked about this idea of timeline weaving. Now, a lot of people talk about timeline jumping. So I'm sure you've heard that term. Perhaps you've even done it. I certainly have. I like timeline weaving. And that is this idea that in our past, there are these roads we began or these branches we started down, and maybe we couldn't finish. Maybe we couldn't finish because of practicality. Maybe we couldn't finish because, illness came along or we got pregnant or, name, life interruption. But it's still there. There's still energy there. And it might be time to timeline weave. If there's a part of you that is wondering, what would have happened had I gone to Ireland for 3 months like I had wanted? What would have happened had I had the time to write a draft of my first novel? You know, question, like all of those. I would write down all of those what ifs and see how you might be able to timeline weave in the present moment to catch yourself up to present reality. So it's a great idea whenever you're unhappy or whenever you're planning a big change or something has to change, to look back over what you've done and to think about when you were the happiest or when you felt the most like you or when you felt like the least stressed out, the most open. There are clues there. Where were you living? What were you doing every day? What habits or hobbies were prioritized? What weren't you doing? Were you sober? Did you join a choir? Like, there's clues there. There's also super, super great data and looking at your patterns and seeing where it's time to no longer self-sabotage, so you can look back and be like, oh, every time I was on the cusp of some kind of breakthrough, I quit. That's a pattern. I'm not shaming you. There's nothing wrong with it. People do this all the time, like it's called being a human, sweetie. I mean, you are special, but you are a human. You can look back and be like, oh, this is what every person I dated and it didn't work out had in common. Oh, okay. These kinds of things. You can look back, decide to no longer self-sabotage, see what you've been afraid of, see what you need to change, which is super important. Remember I was going to say last class. It's been feeling like I've been giving some lectures. Last podcast where I talked about the truth, This is one way to get to the truth, and that is through hindsight. So, I never planned or wanted to have a job like this. I always wanted to be a teacher, artist, designer, maker, writer. That's what I wanted. Musician. I played music a lot. I sang a lot. There are aspects of creation and teaching and making and writing that, of course, I do, but I never wanted a career in so-called mysticism ever. That's been a surprise. And like super honestly with all of you, it's the part of my life I felt the most tension around because I don't feel like, again, some people are like, yes, I know in my heart I'm an astrologer, or I know in my heart I'm a healer. I hear that a lot, In a lot of ways, this happened to me. Like at a certain point, I didn't honestly feel like I had a choice. It just like kept showing up and showing up and showing up. And now I'm in this transition time and I'm wondering what I want to keep, shift, adapt, and what I want to get rid of and what I want to end. And part of that is like me asking myself, do I want to get rid of my entire career? Like in the spiritual tradition or, this part of it. If I could even call what I do a career. I think that's the other part of my ambiguity with all of it. It's like when you are a teacher at a school or at a college, there's a clear career trajectory laid out for you. That's very, you do this and then you do this and then you do this and then you try for this. It isn't like that when you work for yourself. Yes, sure. A lot of people are like, sell your business. I don't really think I want to do that. So I don't want to work towards doing that. Or there's like, I have thought about this one. Now I'm just, musing out loud for all of you and I will stop. But there are other things like retiring early. I've certainly thought about that. I've certainly thought about, configuring things so that I have some major lifestyle changes, so there's all of these other things that are much more visionary and much more off the beaten path. And if you're listening to this, you might be someone who's in it like me, like you work for yourself or, your career or what you're doing is a little more nebulous. People might even ask you, well, what do you do? And you can always make changes. You can always set down a new path, even with, spirituality or what you receive spiritually. I had this client once who was always admitted that they were a little afraid to do readings because they were afraid that certain information would come through and they'd have to like move or change their entire life or something. Like, what if their guides told them they had to become like a monk or something and then move to Utah? And so I said to them, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You don't have to listen to your guides if you don't want. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to the cards. You don't have to do anything. You could also adapt it, right? This goes back to kind of timeline weaving and choice. Maybe it's not a monastery for the rest of your life. Maybe it's a writing retreat. Maybe you don't want to move to Utah, but your next vacation you visit Zion National Park. Like we can adapt. Yeah, we can make choices, right? So this path has been really hard for me. It's been super healing. And so, like, I wanted to share how it's been healing because I always knew there was something different about me. And I don't mean that in a special snowflake way. I truly mean that in a way like I was unable to function in the world like other people. Like I was like, how come everyone else can live so easily and I cannot? And it wasn't until I found my first spiritual modality, which was tarot, that I figured out what it was. And what it was is that I was psychic, aka HSP. And I was like, oh, this all makes sense. This makes sense why parties don't feel like parties. This makes sense why I drink a lot to numb out. This makes sense why crowds are challenging for me. It's because I was totally open. My aura was totally open. I was picking up on way too much. There was too many inputs coming in. I did not know energetic hygiene. And once I started learning how to channel my psychic abilities effectively, daily living and dealing with crowds and dealing with a lot of energy became so much easier. And this is why I'm so passionate about energetic hygiene and why I not only teach like whole classes on energetic hygiene that you can sign up for through the Moon Studio, but I weave energetic hygiene and somatic and energetic practices into like just about every class that I do, because when we are neurodivergent or very sensitive or yes, psychic, we need a different level of attunement to our energy, and a lot of what psychics need to learn is how to turn it off. People will have these like very strange preconceived notions of psychics, like we're reading your thoughts or something. I'm like, why would I waste my energy doing that? Like, no way. I don't do that. I don't do that at all. I talk about this in Better Boundaries, the class I taught. It's non-consensual. Like you utilizing your psychic gifts to like read someone without their consent, it's non-consensual. Does it happen? Sure, it will happen. Can it help us? Absolutely. Like sometimes, yes, the psychic flies out. I can't help it. But mostly I save it for myself, my clients, and my greater work in the world, because that's all consensual. So I found a tarot deck in Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon when I was 23 years old, instantly connected with it, instantly learned it, instantly could read the tarot, never had to take a class. I will say that the books helped me a lot, and I talk about more resources in my classes. So then a few years after giving readings, I discovered I was a medium, and I discovered that I could access people's guides and also the spirits of their ancestors, and I could channel that and give them messages. Then a few years after that, I learned I was a medium for the dead. I could hear and access people's beloveds who had passed. They could talk to me and I could impart messages. I also have the ability to feel people in my body. Like I can feel people's injuries. I can tune into like, certain injuries they might have. It's often pretty clear to me when someone has to go to a naturopath or a doctor. I can't diagnose them. I'm not a medical professional, and no one should ever. If you are not a doctor, if you are not a nurse practitioner, let's not be diagnosing people. Hello. But I can definitely tell when something is off or on health-wise, for sure. I don't know what kind of medium that is. But, and this is another important piece, I didn't want to channel dead people. So I stopped. I stopped doing one-on-one to the public in 2020. Now the only people I do one-on-one readings with are past clients and people I open my books and frequently to my patrons. That's it. You can't get a reading with me. you have to be a past client or current patron of me. The other reason I stopped is I also started realizing I have the ability to channel groups. And that is a lot more useful and helpful to the collective, which is why I put my efforts and energy there. I do want to take a pause and underscore this again. This is maybe the third time I have said this because I think it's important. Just because you can do something does not mean you have to do it. Do you understand? If you don't feel called to channel people's guides, you don't have to. If you can channel people's guides, but you don't want to become a reader, you don't have to, you know? It's like figuring out you're like super fast at running, but you don't have to train to go to the Olympics. Some of you will want to train to go to the Olympics. And you'll have to know, like deep inside, only you can know. But you don't have to do anything with certain gifts if you don't want to. That includes psychic ability. You can be a nurse or a parent or a woodworker or a puzzle maker and have amazing psychic abilities. You don't have to become one or charge money. You can just share your psychic gifts with your friends or whatever, if that's what you want to do. I think that's super important as well. I learned through thousands of one-on-ones that were accurate that I have the ability to be a diviner. Now, tarot literally was created as a divination tool. For hundreds of years, that's been one of its only purposes. And I was a diviner for years. So I started before there was like the internet, y'all. I mean, there was the internet. There was like Yelp and like message boards on Yahoo, which I never went on. But I was all word of mouth. So I would just do word of mouth readings. Like someone would get a reading for me. They'd recommend me to their friends. I'd get passed along. They'd want me to do their birthday parties. Like in LA, this is what I did for years. I didn't advertise at all. Like truly, I didn't advertise at all. Just like people would email me, and I'm just a very good reader. That's the thing. Like I'm very skilled at being a reader. And if you're very good at your job, you will learn quickly that you will get most of your business through your wonderful repeat clients or through referrals. And that's that. That's how it works. That's how really strong business works. It's what I stand by. If you're running a business, have a fantastic service or product that people cannot get anywhere else. That's it. Rinse and repeat. Keep doing it. Keep offering your product over and over. And, the rest will be history, or so to speak. I got my first repeat clients, because they'd come back after 6 months or a year. They would say, almost everything you predicted and talked about came true. So now I'm back for more. Like now I'm back for, round 2. And I learned I could apply that gift to the collective and to groups. And it was accurate. And I loved it because for me personally, helping more people is helping more people. And I want to, again, be super clear. It's not quantity over quality at all. If you feel called to do one-on-one and to do one-on-one only, bless you. Bless you. Some of us were set up energetically for group work. I'm one of those people. Can you learn how to be set up for group work? Totally. Absolutely. 1,000%. Some people are better set up one-on-one or better set up with very small, intimate groups, and they know that about themselves. And I think that's great. So I also just want to say, I think part of what's like exhausting a lot of people is that they're trying to do this whole like scaling thing and like more. And for some people and for some of their gifts and some of their areas of expertise, more doesn't necessarily mean more, and it's not necessarily best for them, But we learn through doing. As I am currently a service provider, part of my motivation is deeply personal, in that if I had access to the information I know now, 20 years ago, my life would be totally different, completely different. Knowledge is power. So if I say one thing that one person hears that is helpful to them and unlocks something, that is more than enough. And that is why I'm doing it. That is the point, and that is phenomenal because that is what has happened to me so many times. A friend of a friend mentioned something. I come across an article. Making knowledge and resources readily available is so important. And that is something really beautiful about social media. Now, I am a proponent of going deeper once you get the information, once you learn you're neurodivergent or once you learn you are intuitive, you got to go deeper in and you got to work with tools that really work. That's definitely why I created Many Moons. 1,000%, to create tools that really work where you can go deeper. And it's channeled for the collective. There's monthly themes and pieces of writing you will not find anywhere else. And if there's that one tarot spread or that one monthly overview, that one ritual in the guide, I mean, there's dozens, there's so many. But if there's one that helps you, I've done my job. I'm never not stunned, honestly. I don't know, all of you Many Moons readers, the monthly themes and monthly spreads are uncanny. I'm like, huh? It's actually very healing to me because, I give up a lot to create this. A lot of time, a lot of energy. It's very costly. It's not a very efficient product. And it's very healing for me to know that certain predictions are on point. Even certain rituals I've created, I don't know if that's happened to you Many Moons when you're like, this is the exact ritual I didn't even know that I needed at this time. That has happened to me. I've been like, I'm crying when I open to it because I'm like, this is so needed. I need this. How did I know I needed this exact fucking spell right fucking now? And of course, it's because I'm channeling guides. I'm channeling the collective guides. And when you open yourself up to something greater than you receive help that is greater than you. And apparently this is a episode where I'm sharing things I've never shared before. I've never shared this publicly. I know I'm channeling because it often doesn't sound like me. Like the words come through in a different way. It's how I know it's my guides. For example, when I used to give readings and I knew someone else's spirit or guide was in the room, weird idioms I didn't even know existed would enter in. Like I would say things like fit as a fiddle, or I would say this almost biblical kind of maxim that I'd never heard before, something that does not exist in my mind, right? It would come through. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is their guides. This is how their guides talk. This is how their ancestors talk. And similarly, there's this group of guides that comes through and it often sounds more formal than maybe how I would write. And those are the collective guides of Many Moons. They give advice. They're here to support us. They'll help you discern. They'll tell you what to watch out for. For example, the theme for October was Let It Go. And I was like, and it also talked about major themes of grief and heartbreak being in the world. And I was like, okay, yes, it tracks. And I remember, here's the other thing, y'all. I remember sometimes when I channel certain themes that are harder and more challenging, I pause. And I think, do I really want to put that out there into the world? Do I really want let it go, or, talking about having to let certain relationships go or grief and heartbreak? But that's part of reality. This is part of reality, and it totally tracked. In October, I organized a bunch. I cleared a ton of energy. I wrote letters and burned them, so on and so forth. And so there's really no other resource out there that not only has all the astro info, but it's also a channeled psychic guide with all these tools you can work with that has a ton of amazing contributors, some that you're going to be hearing from shortly. So that's the intuitive, energetic piece of my existence and what spirituality has given me, which has been beyond invaluable. So much clicked into place for me. And what I want to share with you really is that something I thought of that was a curse became my blessings, so many blessings. And what I mean by that is before I was utilizing my gifts effectively and channeling them, I felt terrible. But once I started utilizing my gifts effectively, I felt so much more balanced and so much better. So what I want to say to you is like, think about where your curse might be your blessing and think about how to channel that energy very effectively. It's a huge part of energetic hygiene. What the cards also gave me, which is huge and has become a huge part of my work, is archetypes. As you know, I've taught classes on them. They figure quite a bit in my work. I work with them quite a bit psychically, energetically, as maps, as future templates. Archetypes are the embodiment of energy. And what the cards gave me was an endless font of resources and answers through an archetypal lens. And in doing so, a map into the entire human psyche. And in doing so, a key into a rich doorway of all these different embodiments of energy, which is super, super helpful. That's also why many moons include so much tarot in it. I found there's no better tool for both self-inquiry and to give you more insight into your possible futures or why certain things are happening. And that's why there's this monthly poll. This is why, often the rituals will have tarot woven into it because it allows you to become the diviner for yourself, which is the absolute coolest skill set you can have, don't you think? And that is also what many moons is designed to do. So there's also magic and ritual. I don't want to spend that much time there because I have done many episodes on magic in this podcast that you can look up. You can just Google, search for magic under this podcast, and you can see the different episodes. The other thing that I found that was very fundamental for my healing, for my transformation work, is the moon. That was about probably 4 or 5 years after tarot, but not just any moon. Many moons. No, I'm just kidding. The entire lunation, we're missing out on so much when we're just chilling with a new moon and nothing else. We're missing out on so much when we're only hanging out with the full moon. And I will say that there is this compartmentalization that happens in pop spirituality or pop astrology about the moon and their cycles. It's when we work with an entire lunation or larger lunations, really 3 or 4 lunations around one desire, topic, theme, or maybe 1 or 2, no more than 3. Okay. I know. I'm a maximalist, but let's try to stick to 3 or less because the moon is that territory of intuition, the body, the subconscious, inner child healing, shadow work. And I wrote a book on it and I also taught about it for a couple of years. It was great. And every single time I feel stuck, I use the technique I invented, the technique that I teach. And every single time it works and helps shift me out. And that is, of course, what Many Moons is also designed to do, if that is what you would like it to. It's meant to support your lunar practice, your intuition and self-knowledge and subconscious and imagination and embodiment practice. So when you get your copy, you can try it out for yourself. The last piece that I think I'll end with, because again, I could be here forever, but I shan't and I won't. The last piece is this intersection, of course, between spirituality and healing. The practices I folded into my life, whether it's journaling, magic, nervous system regulation, visualization, creativity, working with the moon, whatever it is, it's been incredibly restorative, incredibly healing. It's shown me myself and what I'm capable of. It's shown me myself and how I sabotage myself and limit myself as well. It's shown me what my patterns are and where they are ancestral or how they have come through in past lives. It's shown me how much healing occurs when we dive into the subconscious and we reprogram the mind through the subconscious and nervous system and then zoom out and get support from other places. And we weave our ancestors into it. And we utilize our imagination and creativity and intuition and really bring all of ourselves into our own recovery and into our own wholeness and into our own life as we allow ourselves to live within these cycles of nature, these phases of life, decay, compost, death, and rebirth. And Many Moons attempts to be this guide to help steward and support you on your own path. Because for me, it's always all the things. It's not one of the things. It's the grief, the sorrow, then it's the joy and the bliss. It's the unknown, and then it's the known. It's the full spectrum of what being a human is, all of it. And the only other place I really share like my personal stories is in the Patreon because folks, again, they say it's useful and helpful. I'll usually ground my teachings there in a personal share or a personal process. And again, like folks there tell me it's like every time I'm like, should I talk about myself? And every time they're like, yes, this was so useful. This was so helpful. I understand it now. I do think one of my gifts is taking these larger esoteric concepts and breaking them down and being able to apply them practically. I do have a Virgo stellium, but I just think it's one of my gifts, astrology or not, because I really value that. I really do not value very vague, very nebulous teachings that do not ground the teachings in practice or in reality, because it's hard to find your footing in that way. And this is actually something I've been thinking about because of the eclipses that are going to be happening with this Pisces North Node and the Virgo South Node. It's like going to be really useful to know what works for you. And it's going to be really useful to stay away from vagueness and to stay, like run away from nebulosity and things that sound really good, but don't really give you any tools or techniques or any details on how to do the thing or carry out, the healing or whatever it might be. So I shared a little bit about how I came to spirituality. I really hope you will pick up a copy of Many Moons. If you like this podcast, the podcast is kind of a drop compared to what we do behind the scenes in our group work at the Moon Studio and our products like Many Moons. I know you'll love it. I'm sending you so much love. I'll be back next week with another fresh episode off the presses. If you love the pod, could you please share it with a friend that might enjoy it as well, or share it on social? I'd really appreciate it. To whoever shares, I appreciate you so much. You are wonderful angels. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you for listening and tuning in and reviewing it and being here with me every week. It's remarkable. I appreciate you so much. I'm actually literally visualizing certain people who have been in my group work for a long time and certain people who I know from the Patreon. I'm like sending you so much love. Hopefully you can feel all of the love from my heart. I hope you have a beautiful, lovely week, and we'll be back soon. Moonbeaming is a Moon Studio production. It is edited by the wonderful Amelia Ruby at Softer Sounds, and theme music is by Melissa Caitlin Carter of Making Audio Magic. Hire them both for all your audio and podcast needs. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're always looking for aligned sponsors. So if you are a business or creative who'd like to sponsor an episode or two, reach out. If you love this podcast, please consider joining our membership to support it, sharing on social media, passing it along to friends, or leaving us a 5-star review. We'd appreciate it so much, and we appreciate you. Thanks for being here.